is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Pantera from Projects in the Jungle. That one is called In Over My Head. And here's a guy that, I got to say, I might be in over my head because he completes the circle of Pantera guys for me. I'm very excited to talk to him because of his Pantera ties, as well as Lord Tracy and now Raised by Gods. It's vocalist Terry Glaze. How are you, man?
Doing really good. How are you?
Good, man. Excellent. Well, Terry, as I said there in the intro, man, you complete the circle for me. I have officially interviewed everybody that's ever recorded on a Pantera record. So for that alone, I say thank you very much, man. That's very cool of you.
It's pretty crazy stuff, isn't it?
It is, man. Well, Terry, let's talk about you, man. I mean, you've had a longer career than everybody realizes. I think because of your association to Pantera, you don't get all the credit for the other stuff that you've done. But at the same time, I think that also keeps you in people's eye a little bit. So where do you put your career and your association to Pantera?
Well, that's where it all started for me. And that's how I learned how to do everything pretty much. Vince was in the same class with me in high school, and Rex was at the school, down the road, and I think Daryl was still in middle school when we first got together.
Very cool. And then, so how do you guys end up in a band? Was it just you guys were just high school kids looking for something to do, and you started then, or was it after that, or what?
I tell you, it must have been 10th, 11th grade. I was playing with a bass player named Tommy Bradford.
Okay.
And we had a band, and we wanted to jam with a better drummer. And the best drummer in the school was Vince Abbott.
Okay.
And so Tommy Bradford and Tommy was the original bass player in Pantera. And so we had this band, and we had a singer named Donnie Hart.
Right.
And so the three of us, we joined forces with Vince because we wanted to play with a better drummer. And the way I remember it is, Daryl was just a little kid, and he was not. It was like, Vince was like, I'll take your singer if you'll take my little brother. And so the five of us started, and Vince was the best. And so we got together, and we started jamming and playing songs, and that was like the first Def Leppard album,
mm-hmm.
and April Wine and stuff like that, and the side story on that was Vince and Daryl's father was a recording engineer.
Right.
So that was a big deal. So I kind of wanted to try and write songs. So early on, we started going in the recording studio and being kind of learning how to do it.
Okay.
We were still in high school. And so Vince and Daryl's father, Jerry Abbott, he became our manager, and he bankrolled us, and, we got a PA and a trailer, and, we started doing it. So we were playing bars when we were 15 and 16 years old.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it all started. And originally it was us five. Donnie ended up stepping out later. Really, I just wanted to sing my own songs.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where that came from. And then going into our senior year of high school, Tommy Bradford just didn't want to do it anymore, playing bass. So we looked around to find the best local bass player we could find, and Rex was at the other local high school, and we called him, and we got together, and that's when kind of, we started working on our first vinyl LP for our first record.
Sure.
And so the four of us, we did that, and then we would go out and play and sell records off the bandstand, and that went till, we did three albums.
Mm-hmm.
So we were playing, we were these young kids, and we were out touring Texas and Louisiana every weekend, just playing. It was amazing.
Sure. Now, when you were going through that, Terry, certainly you guys wrote some great music, and you mentioned Def Leppard, and certainly there is a ton of influence to Def Leppard if you listen to to especially the first two records. It seemed like it started to change a little bit, right before you left the band. So, talk a little bit about how the band progressed and what it was that changed for you. Because unless I understand it wrong, you chose to leave the band because you weren't feeling the direction they were going. Is that correct?
Well, not really. When you're learning how to do it and you're listening to your heroes play and everything, so we started getting influenced by, those bands, but also then Motley Crue went huge and Iron Maiden, and we started playing, and we would play like 3 sets a night. We'd do a dance set of covers, and then we'd come out and we'd play all originals a second set.
Okay.
And then we'd come and play heavy stuff, maybe like Judas Priest and UFO and stuff like that. And that's kind of the period of the first 2 records. And then after that second record, Daryl met James Hetfield and Lars from Metallica. And they came to town a couple of times to hang out with Daryl and jam with Daryl. And Daryl became a huge fan. We all got in the Suburban and drove to, I think it was Tyler, Texas. We saw Metallica's first tour playing like a school cafeteria or something out in Tyler, and it was incredible. And from that moment on, the music started going heavier, and so it was really cool. The one thing I liked about, the band was that we all kind of liked different things, and we all kind of combined that to try and make our own thing.
Okay.
But the reason I quit was, I loved the 2 hours of the day on stage.
Okay.
It was the other 22. It was the other 22 hours of the day I wanted to, kill them. There was no musical problems. It was just, I wanted to do something different, I guess,
Sure.
And but I never, it was the greatest. We'd been together so long, and we had such camaraderie, and you could just, you knew what the other guys were going to do, and it was the greatest. It's tough. It's tough to think that, I was lucky to get to play with other great musicians after that, because it very easily could have been done right then, because that was Daryl's the greatest guitar player I've ever played with.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I was fortunate to go on and find other great musicians. I've been playing nonstop since then. I never stopped. I got in my next band like a week later. And I just put out a record a couple months ago. So I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I get to play music every day.
Sure. Well, and it is. It's such a great, it's a great outlet, and it's great for somebody that started young and hasn't had to, live the tragedy of, okay, now I'm in somebody's cubicle doing the what could have been type of a thing. You've really gotten to live as a rock and roll musician, which is what it sounds like you wanted to do from the time you were, 15 years old.
I think so. I don't think I understood it back then, and it wasn't until decades later that I realized how, I remember getting asked, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, can I keep doing what I've been doing, realizing how awesome it was to get up every day and be able to play music.
Sure.
I don't know that I took it for granted, but it's always been I've been really lucky. That's an understatement.
Right, definitely. Now, and I don't want to just only harp on Pantera, because I definitely want to talk about the Lord Tracy stuff as well as the new stuff. But when you were in a band with clearly a prodigy like Dimebag, or Diamond at the time, just as Daryl,
Yeah.
You see it. I'm quite sure. You just know that you're in a band with somebody special, as far as performance-wise. But how difficult is it when you see somebody that is emerging like that to also work in your own thing and not let that guy, overwhelm the project?
The way I remember it was Daryl, back then we didn't have YouTube, and we didn't have, all of these things that help you learn and help you teach you stuff. And the way I remember it is Daryl basically went in his room when he was a teenager, maybe 16 years old, and just went in there and woodshedded and came out 6 months later, and he was just fully formed. He could play anything. And when you listen back to maybe the second and third vinyl, the Pantera records that we did, I swear the guitar sounds exactly the same. Right. You know, he just came out as this thing, but he was one of the most genuine, most passionate, and he was easy to get along with.
Oh yeah.
And he just pushed you. So, you know, on the first record, I played guitar and Daryl played guitar. But once we started playing live, I wanted to be like Van Halen. And so Daryl could play literally anything. So, you know, by the second record, Daryl just took over all the guitars. But when we played live, if we were going to play Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or stuff like that, then he and I would work out the harmonies and stuff like that. And it just gave us all of this. We could play anything. Back then, we were playing clubs 3, 4, 5, 6 nights a week, and we just played all the time. And we would, you know, you'd hear a new song by Ozzy on the radio, and we would tape it on the cassette, and we'd go back and learn the song, and we'd play it that night at the club. You know, nobody even knew the song yet. But we were so hungry to play songs and grow and keep moving. It was just a great experience.
Sure. Now, I've asked Vince this question several times, and he always gives me a corporate answer. I'll ask you the same question where I don't think I'll get a corporate answer. I'll get probably a little more of a real answer. Why are the records that you did not released?
Vince has the masters. I wish he'd put them out. I would love it if they would be out. It'd be great for all the fans to get to hear Daryl, you know, play like he did, because he's such an amazing talent. Sure,
he really was, and it's funny because every time I've talked to Vince, and I've interviewed him 24 times. I mean, I just so you know, I know the guys very well. I'm still friendly with Philip. I'm decently friendly with Vince. I knew Dime. Hell, Dime was, like you were saying about being friendly. I was interviewing Dime once, and he didn't like a question I asked him. It was an in-person. And so he challenged me to a Karate Kid kickoff on the top of some speakers, you know, and that's just how that cat seemed to roll. It sounds like that's who he was even when, you know, in the early days too. He's just fun and silly and, you know, always seemed to get on with everybody, no?
It was like wrestlers 24/7. Never, the camera was never turned off. It was like that. It was so wild and crazy all the time.
Right.
You had to not turn your back, or you know, you don't want to be the first person to fall asleep because something's going to happen.
Exactly, man. Well, dude, after you leave Pantera, you go on and you, I don't know, did you form Lord Tracy yourself, or did you join Lord Tracy, or how do you end up in that band?
After I left Pantera, I started getting calls from lots of different bands all over Texas and whatever surrounding. And I had this idea that I wanted to put a band together with this bass player named Kenley Wolf. Kenley is a bass player, in my opinion, on the same level as Daryl is on guitar.
Wow.
And so he had this little band with two friends from Memphis, and they were in Dallas playing. And they called me up and said, hey, you want to come down and check it out? Well, I went down there with just thinking I was going to steal this bass player to form a band. And so they're just a blues-based thing. And they asked me, do I want to join in? And they played a song by Cheap Trick. Well, they didn't know Cheap Trick was my favorite band.
Okay.
So then they said, do you want to go to Memphis and next weekend and go do a gig? And I thought, well, I got nothing else going. So I went and did that. And it was such a great experience that that was it. So I was only out of Pantera about a week or so, and I joined this band, and we were originally called 3D, and we didn't change the name to Lord Tracy until we already had a record deal. I think we had changed the band's name to Tracy Lords. That's what it was. And that was at that time, for all the young people, that was an underage porn star.
Right.
And so we were calling ourselves Tracy Lords. And we get signed, and we're in L.A., and we start to hear that she doesn't like this. And so we invited her to come down and sing on a song. I had a song on the first Lord Tracy record called She's a Bitch, and I thought this would be perfect. I'll have her sing along with me. She, at that time, I think, was trying to become a crossover, maybe music and everything. She had other visions of not what I had intended, so it didn't happen. And we could not come up with a new name. I mean, we just couldn't, and names are hard sometimes.
Sure.
And my future brother-in-law says, why don't you just flip it around? And we were like, Lord Tracy, this is genius. It was so stupid. But by that time, we needed something, and we went with it, and it stuck. So when we were out touring that record, we would make up stories and all kinds of reasons, but that's really where it came from.
Very nice. Now that band, it seemed like that band, you know, at the start, I remember initially hearing about the band, and it seemed like it went away almost as quick as it came up, but it really didn't, because it seems like you guys were there for a while, but then you came back, and like 15 years later, you like kind of re-put it back together and have done three or four albums after the initial record, right?
Well, yeah, we signed a record deal with a division of MCA, and the way it was presented to us, we were going to be one of six. So I felt like we can't lose. We're only going to be one of six. And just before our record came out, the different record president came in, and we were absorbed into MCA. So instead of one of six, we were now one of 600.
Ugh.
And it was literally like Spinal Tap. All the versions in Spinal Tap where the record company doesn't know you. So we got handed to all of these promotion people that didn't know us. And we just kind of got lost in the tracks. We went out and did a tour with Ace Frehley.
Okay.
My childhood idol. I took it for granted. We played all these gigs. It was incredible. And then we had 2 videos on MTV, and it was going, and then it just wasn't. And I don't know. You know, like I said, it was just wrong place at the wrong time. It was going great, and then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Sure, and when you get absorbed like that, you know, and this is something people probably don't realize as much. When you probably went into this, you're getting told, well, you're going to have all this budget, and there's going to be videos,
Absolutely.
and there's going to be all this stuff. Well, then you get absorbed, and now you're competing with, like, Bobby Brown, I think, was out on the same label in 1989. So now they're going to.
It was all that. It was all that, and all that was getting really big. And when you're getting crushed by Fine Young Cannibals, it's not a good feeling.
Exactly. And what's got to be even worse is you're listening to Fine Young Cannibals, and that sucks song that they're doing, and they're just throwing money at it that should be going to you, putting you on another tour or something.
Before we got absorbed, I think we spent over $250,000 on that record, and really it shouldn't have cost that much. We were just trying to be rock stars. We thought we were doing. And we had 2 big budget videos, but when we got absorbed, it all kind of changed. Actually, we asked off of MCA because we had all this material for the next record with all this confidence that we would get picked up by someone else. But once we didn't have a label, then we couldn't get back in the doors anyplace.
Oh,
so it just didn't happen. But it wasn't. I don't feel like it was because of the band. It was just, it didn't happen. But man, at that time, the band was really ripping. We ended up getting a record deal. We signed with MCA Uni before Pantera signed their deal. And we were both out. I ran into them, I think, twice out on the road.
Oh, wow.
So it was it was real cool. Daryl came up, and when we were doing a gig in Dallas, he came. I remember Daryl showed up to one of my gigs in Dallas, the basement. And he jumped on stage, and it was real cool. And after the gig, he took me out in his limo and had a cassette rough mix of their second album on the major releases, Vulgar Display.
Okay.
And we sat in that limo, and he was air guitaring to Mouth for War. And we were sitting there rocking out, and I was like, man, that's Van Halen. He was like, I know, right? And it was an incredible feeling. So I'll never forget that night, jamming to that record before it came out in the back of a limo on a cassette tape.
Sure. Now, it sounds like you kept, at least with Dime, you kept your friendship. Were you still friendly with Vince as well all the way through, or are you still now, or not at all, or what?
Vince came out to see me play in Dallas. It was right a couple months before Daryl was killed. They had just come back from that night. They had just come back from Europe, doing a Damage play, trying to promote it. And they came back. Vince shows up at the Curtain Club. We hung out afterwards. He was like, "Man, Daryl's asleep." Whatever. We had I just thought, I really had a feeling like we were going to get together and maybe make some music again sometime. It was just really cool that he came out. And then, wasn't to be.
Right.
I still talk to Rex a couple times a year. He'll give me a call or text me if something's going on. But I have not spoken to Vince since Daryl's funeral.
Okay.
I've reached out a couple times. It just hasn't happened. I'd love to catch up with him, but it just hasn't happened yet.
Sure. Now you were at the funeral, and certainly, in my lifetime, probably the most traumatic musical experience of my lifetime was the passing of Dimebag, just because, and I certainly didn't know him like you knew him, but I did have a friendship whenever he rolled through Cleveland. I always went and hung out with him and, drank very heavily with him and whatnot. But, that had to be tragic and surreal and, probably all kinds of emotions for you, not only seeing your friend die, but seeing, just the whole world mourn around this guy that you grew up with.
Daryl's buried in the cemetery where my grandparents are buried and where my father-in-law is buried. So, I was at Daryl's gravesite, I don't know, a month ago.
Okay.
Because every time I go to town, I stop by and try and pay my respects to my family, and then I always walk over there to Daryl's site. But the thing I remember, first off, everyone was hammered at the funeral.
Right.
There was a service during the day at the cemetery, and then there was that kind of celebration at the concert hall thing that night. But what I remember is that it was so unbelievable because Daryl's body was laying there, in I think it was a kiss casket or something. I can't remember. It was just he looked beautiful. He just looked like he was asleep. It just did not. I couldn't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until the next day I went back to the cemetery, to the actual gravesite, and it wasn't until I saw the dirt that it really kind of sunk in that this is happening. I don't know. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And I honestly think, most people still can't believe it, because the guy was, at least in my mind, he was so full of life. It's hard to believe that he's not still here, Yeah,
it's incredible. It's a testament to his talent and his personality that, man, everybody's still talking.
Yeah.
It seems like it wasn't that long ago, but it's been a couple years.
Yeah, it's been 12 or 12,
I know.
12 years.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Well, Terry, let's get out of the depressing stuff. Let's talk about something a little more fun. When I reached out to you, you turned me on to your new band, which I was not aware of, called Raised by Gods. What a kick-ass band, man. The stuff I've heard, the stuff you sent me, and the stuff that's out there on Spotify and whatnot, this band kicks ass, man. Talk a little bit about this, because this is something people should be looking for and listening to.
Thanks. It's really a weird thing. I left LA, I think in 94. And at that time I had a drummer. I was playing in a band with this guy who's with me in Raised by Gods. His name's Mike Harrington.
Okay.
And we played out there. So I move away, and around a couple of years later, we start sending little cassette tapes back and forth through the mail. And that's where this band, so we've literally been playing together this whole time. And the way it works is Mike hears some arrangement of drums, some piece in his head, and he sits down and records his composition.
Okay.
And then he mails me the drum tracks, and I get them. And then I write a song to his drums. And then, so I'll play all the other instruments. And then when it's finished, I send him the finished song that he's playing on that he's never heard before. And that's how the first Raised by God's record was back in 2011.
Okay.
And so it's the most weird, backwards, kind of really cool. The point being that his drums and his rhythmic riffs and all that stuff inspire me to write songs typically. And so the drums come first before the songs, which is really weird, you know?
Yeah.
Now, this last record, I think there are 2 songs on there that I demoed with like a guitar and a click track and sent them to him. That song that I sent you, My Carina, I had actually charted that one out. But the other song that I sent you called Red Dress Woman,
yeah,
I got the drums. And the drums made me go ba-da-da-da-da, because that's, you know, so without him, without Mike, I probably never would have wrote that song.
Wow. So
and also he's on the East Coast, I'm on the East Coast, he's on the West Coast. We never actually are in the same time zone. We've only played 2 live shows in 10 years.
Jeez. well, man, how many times have you sent stuff back to him and he's like, that's completely not what I was thinking?
That's what he says every time. He goes, if I would have known that's what you were going to do, I would have played something different. But, you know, it's the greatest feeling. He's one of my most favorite musicians I've ever played with. And I always look forward to, you know, getting that manila envelope with a tape in it, because I know there's going to be some jewel in there. Because we've put records out. We changed the name of the band to Raised by Gods in 2011, but there are 2 or 3 or 4 records on iTunes. You can find them that just say Mike and Terry. That's us. Just back then, we never thought we were doing something. We were just, you know, having fun, trying to crack jokes or whatever. But, you know, we've put out so much material over the last 10 years. The difference was the third person came into the project in 2010, a real famous British mixer, producer, engineer named Neil Kernan.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Neil, the weird part about it was, back in '89, Lord Tracy was interviewing producers.
Okay.
And we interviewed Tom Werman and this other famous guy and this other famous guy, whatever. So Neil Kernan, I don't know who he is. He comes in to Dallas and he comes to watch us play. And here's this rocker dude with chicks and all this, you know. And I'm so full of shit. I say, well, what have you done? And he says, well, I did the brand new Queensryche and I did the new Dawkins.
All right.
Well, I don't like them. So he doesn't know what I like. So I just said, well, that's F great, and I just tuned him out. So he doesn't get the gig. We picked Mark Dodson, this great guy, and we loved hanging out with him. But years later, Neil Kernan does a record with Barney, the drummer from Lord Tracy, a band called American Fuse.
Okay.
And we reconnect. And so when Lord Tracy gets back together, we put out a record in the 2000s, 2008 maybe, called Born Again.
Mm-hmm.
And I have all this material, and we get back together. When we fly to Chicago, and Neil Kernan mixes the album. And I go out and become friends with this guy. And Neil says, you know, Lord Tracy is the only band I ever wanted to do that told me no.
Wow.
And I find out that just because I'd come out of Pantera, Neil thought I liked heavy music, but he didn't know that I liked songs. Well, it turns out Neil Kernan did all of those Hall & Oates records.
Right.
Like all the hits. And he worked with Queen, and he worked with Sex Pistols, and he worked on all. If Neil Kernan, when I would have asked in '89, when I would have said, what did you work on? If he would have said, well, I did You Make My Dreams Come True by Hall & Oates, I would have got on my knees and begged him to do our record. So it was so stupid that I didn't know who he was. So we do this record, we become friends, and in 2009 or 10, Neil says, well, if you got some tracks, you should send me one. I'll mix it for you. So I sent him a song that became one of the songs on the Raised by God's records, and it's so good compared to what I sent him. And I was like, right, this is like going to be a real record. So that's when Mike and I decided to try and come up with a name for our project, and he came up with the idea for calling the band Raised by Gods. And so Neil is really the third thing that makes it go, because when I record it and when Mike records it, it sounds like, two tin cans and a piece of string.
Right.
Neil makes it sound like it sounds, that kick-ass thing. And without Neil, it would just be little demos. But that's kind of the secret, how we kind of, over the last 5 years.
So does he get involved with the arrangements and stuff as well? Does he?
No. I do all of that. I send him the tracks, and it's kind of like, it's all Pro Tools rigs, but it's kind of like getting a 2-inch tape. I don't send him 80 tracks. Like whenever you're in a recording magazine and you see, all of the tracks and stuff, he pretty much gets, drums, 2 guitars, 3 vocals, and a solo. And that's one, I think, why Neil kind of likes working with me is there's no programming. There's no, if I sing it wrong, it's easier for me to just sing it again instead of trying to fix it with a plug-in or whatever. And you know what? So there's no, it's all real. So Neil takes it and takes those drums and makes them sound like a record, and then makes my guitars and vocals and make it sound like a record.
Sure.
But and the beauty of it is I'm so excited every day or so when you're doing that mixing, that every little bit of progress every day or so, you get a file in your computer and Neil calls you and you get to talk. And the best part of it for me is I get Neil to tell me a story every day about, recording with Neil Diamond or recording with Jeff Beck or The Who or, when I was miking up John Entwistle. It's just the greatest, It's like an encyclopedia of rock God history stuff,
Very cool, man. Well, dude, what does the future look like for Raised by Gods? Are you working on new stuff now, or where are you at with it?
Yeah, actually, Mike and I, he's supposed to send me a track for a song that we did a long time ago that we found this little crappy recording, and we were like, man, we got to do that, so it'll sound right. Also, when I finished the most recent Raised by God's record, I had 2 songs that I had done with a local drummer here, and I had sent the tracks to Dallas, and Kenley Wolf, the bass player from Lord Tracy, he did bass on these 2 songs, and one of my best friends in Dallas named Dave Heineman, he did the guitars. So none of us have ever been in the same room together, and he sent those back. So I finished those 2 songs, and I sent those to Neil, and he mixed those also. So we got those mastered. So I'm open to put out, I've got 2 singles that I'm open to put out under my name.
Okay.
And that'll be coming up, maybe one in another month, and then a couple months later, Mike and I are already starting to talk about new things. But I don't know. I've got a lot of records on iTunes. They're just spread out under my name and Lord Tracy and Mike and Terry and, Raised by Gods. And back then I never thought about putting them out under the same name because, I don't know, I just didn't think ahead.
Right. Well, it's interesting, and I've talked to literally thousands of musicians at this point, and you're probably the first one I think I've ever spoken to that actually seems to like doing the recordings in the more modern way. We're throwing pieces, parts back and forth, and creating that way. It seems like most people they do it because it's more convenient, but most everybody I talk to is always like, we'd rather get in a jam room and just blah blah blah. It actually sounds like you enjoy doing it this way, maybe more than actual 4 guys in a rooming it. No,
I think the one thing is whenever I'm with Mike in the same place, which is every couple of years, you know, we have this great connection. But he's in L.A., I'm over here, you know, D.C., Annapolis area, and we both got families, and we can't. We're trying to make the best of what we have. So instead of being bummed out that I can't fly to L.A. every month and record, I look at it as, look at this opportunity. I get to do something. And so I kind of look at the best of it instead of the negative of it. And also, I just feel lucky to get to play. So, you know, I play music here in town. I play solos and duos, and I've got a killer cover band that we play. So I play all the time, different kind of stuff, and it's really cool to get inspired and not get in a rut.
Right.
You know, so I feel that's, you know, I just feel so lucky. I fly back to the Midwest and do shows. Lord Tracy played a couple months ago. We played Dallas and Memphis back to back. That was just a rock show weekend with the, you know, the required bus that breaks down in the middle of Bumfuck, Arkansas. I mean, all the stuff that you want. You know, get back to the Midwest and eat food and hang with your friends and see family. So I'm really, really lucky, and I know it. I do love the process of recording. I love recording with people, but I just like making music and creating. I really love the process.
Excellent, man. Well, Terry, we're going to wrap this one up with one of the songs by Raised by Gods. We're going to play Red Dress Woman. And what can you tell us about this one? And, you know, give all the plugs and whatnot where people can find you so that so we can sell you a couple of songs or something.
Man, that'd be awesome. My webpage is terryglaze.com. You can find everything there. You can find me on Facebook. It's me. Raised by Gods, all that stuff has Facebook pages and web pages and stuff. The records are out on iTunes. The records are on Amazon. The latest record is, the band's called Raised by Gods. The second record is called Too Late Now. This song you're going to play is called Red Dress Woman. Mike sent me the drums. I got inspired. I wrote kind of the first thing I thought was I recorded these tracks, and it turned out that was the song. I was thinking, I got inspired. I was kind of thinking like Jack White doing Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the guitar parts and everything come. Mike's playing drums, which came first, and I'm making all the other noises. But I just want to say, man, thanks for calling, and it was really cool, you know, reminiscing about, you know, all the cool stuff in the past and everything that's, you know, today and tomorrow. And I'm really excited about the future and, you know, what's coming with music and art. I think these next few years are going to be really interesting.
Agree totally, man. Well, let's check it out right now. This is Raised by Gods. This is Red Dress Woman right here on your Classic Metal Show.